Hi everyone, it's Natalie, and I'm here to do a response to the hashtag tarot happiness. So I saw a few of the VRs to this one, and I just thought, what a wonderful, wonderful topic. And so I went back and I watched Strength Reversed and saw her original video, because I think she's the originator of the hashtag. And I loved it. So Strength Reversed, your video was so inspiring and so beautiful. And I totally clicked on the video about the missing cards in your deck and had a great time with that as well. So, but yeah, I love the tarot so much. And so this was a really natural one to do a VR to for me. So, tarot happiness, according to Natalie, I would have to say number one, jumping cards. So, I think most of us have had that experience. I know that Nina from Shuffle Tarot talks about this a lot too. You pick up a deck and you just start shuffling it, and as you're shuffling, you're sitting da-da-da-da-da. All of a sudden, one card just goes poof and jumps right out of the deck at you. And I love that so much. And number two, every deck has a different voice. Oh my gosh. So when I look at pulling together what decks do I want to use for a particular month, one of the things I like to do is just look for decks that have totally different voices from one another, and who are possibly also completely different systems from one another, right? One thing I really love about the Marielle, and I say these, there's a million things I always love about the Marielle, but it's just how different the voice is in this deck. The same thing that makes it a different voice is also maybe what makes this particular deck sing to me, and speak to me at a level that few other decks have ever managed to accomplish in the same kind of way. Although I would say that I'm learning that even if it's a deck that I don't immediately connect to, give it some time, and the chances are that I will probably connect to it on some level, as long as I'm willing to be open to that, to understand its voice. But number three is when a querent sees a card and they instantly know. And you watch their face and you watch that look as the card registers to them. And there's something about it that feels maybe familiar or that rings a bell. And it's just such a beautiful opportunity in a reading to be with that person and give them space to tap into their own wisdom. Because I feel like that's probably the number one thing I want for people, in general. So I felt that way as a teacher, certainly. And I feel like if I'm working with, as a facilitator, or in this case as a reader, that's what I want for people. I want them to see and create their own meaning, and recognize their own power and their own wisdom and their own ability to understand things for themselves. To see a querent light up, or on one occasion, it wasn't that long ago, a couple of cards were laid out and we were looking at them, and suddenly the querent looked at a particular card, and her nose got kind of red and her eyes got kind of red, and you can see it when something drops in someone and it becomes emotional for them. So I just paused and gave her space to see what would happen and what would come up, and it was wonderful. It was just so wonderful, and it took the reading in a totally different direction, and it opened space, for communication with this person who, although I know her, I'd never read cards for her before. So it was a completely different, context to our interaction, and we'd never really had that before. So just seeing that was just beautiful. Number 4, we're never going to know everything. We will never ever individually, as people, maybe as a culture, I don't know, but I don't think we're ever going to be able to know everything. So part of why I love being on YouTube is hearing all of the different varied perspectives and experiences and really, intelligences and wisdoms that people have that I can't know, or I could never know because I'm not them, and I don't have their life experience, or I don't have their perspective. I'm not them. And the kind of richness that brings to the experience of learning and being with the tarot is just irreplaceable. Number 5, moving on. Number 5 is alive. Number 5, reading the artwork and the artist behind the deck. So exciting. One of my favorite artists to read, mostly because I wasn't initially drawn to her artwork, right? And I've admitted that and said that initially several times on the channel, but it's Mary Elizabeth Evans. And, I started with her apparition deck, which I am still completely in love with, and I've been playing with Spirit Speak. Even these decks from the same artist, completely different voice. Why? Because, excuse me, my breakfast is like, hello. But because, Mary Elizabeth Evans is in a completely different place in her life. And was in, what happens after you create one tarot deck, you create the second one, and you're in a different place of knowing and understanding and being able to describe, what the Ten of Swords is. And so for me, I started with apparition because I was curious, and then I moved on from that to this one, and she did this one first. So in a way, it's kind of like reading an author. Reading an author at the beginning of their career, right, or their series of books, and then watching how their understanding develops or changes. I don't know. And that, for me, that is a really fascinating pursuit that I never get tired of. Next thing I love, number 6, deck interviews. I love deck interviews because, again, it's like getting to know somebody new. The decks might both be, very minimalist and in some ways kind of similar with that minimalism. But again, they're written by or created by different people. And so they'll read differently. They'll feel differently. They might both be very faithful to the Rider-Waite lineage in terms of card interpretation. But getting to know, again, that deck and the way that it reads and the way that it feels and the way that it shuffles and the way that it wants to talk to you, it's completely different. Number 7, those moments when you're doing a reading and you lay out your spread and everything is immediate and clear. So it's like, yay, there it is. Number 8. When a spread's meaning eludes you and suddenly clicks. So you lay the cards out and you sit there and you think, uh-oh, I have no idea what any of this means. Oh my gosh, the person's staring at me. They've known me, for 10 years and thought I was a great person and that I really know things and I might be spiritual, and now I can't even read these cards. I'm saying I might want to read, professionally, what am I going to do? And then suddenly, as you're, because I think we all have that, right? I think that's a pretty universal experience, right? If you read. But then suddenly, as you're sitting there just kind of going, okay, I'm going to take a breath. it's all going to be okay. You know, I'm just going to look and see what's here. And then suddenly out of nowhere, it clicks. And that's just such a beautiful moment when that happens. Which takes us to number 9. It all just keeps going even further and further, right? On number 9, when you can't connect to a spread at all, right? So you just resort to describing what's in the cards instead because you're desperate and you don't know what else to do, and the person's sitting looking at you and waiting for something to happen, and then suddenly it clicks. And the querent then tells you, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. I have no idea that that was, you know, going to be so spot on. Who knew? That happened. That happened to me at the tarot meetup at the beginning of the month. So what, about 2 weeks ago, was the video where I talked about finding the hagstone that same night. I went to that tarot meetup and I sat down. I was the only person there besides the leader. And we started laying out cards, and I was so excited to read for her. And the first reading was fine. The second one, I just sat and stared, and I thought, oh crap. You know, she thought the first one was so good. I'm doing this one. And I can't make heads or tails of it. I can't seem to get it to come together. So I remembered what Rachel Pollack said in one of the Masters of the Tarot videos about, you know, the best way to read the cards is just say what you see, like what's in there, what's in the card. And so I started doing that and kind of stringing it together like a story. And despite the fact that I'm so overly verbose here on my channel, when I read, I'm actually really concise, and that's something I had to work on. So it's been the task over the last few months to just go, nope, get it right to the point. But I managed to read that to her pretty quickly, and that was when she said, wow, have you ever thought about doing this professionally? You're really good at this. So never underestimate, like, I think Tom Benjamin just did a video about this, like the end of the week. It was the one about the cornucopia of tarot suggestions and tips. It works. I mean, it's just a really, you know, if Rachel Pollack thinks that that's a good way to read, it can't be bad, right? So number 10, the feeling of home and safety. So some of you know this and some of you won't necessarily. So I'll tell you again. I started reading cards when I was 19 in college, and went on to read for years. And I would read, you know, I read professionally and semi-professionally, and I had my little business card. And anyway, I got to my late 20s and kind of my other career work started to take over, so I did it less and less and less. And then eventually in my early 30s, when I moved back to the States, I quit. So when I came back to it again recently, it was really exciting because it was like, wow, look, there's the tarot. I love it, and it feels like home. I feel, you know, when I'm holding a deck of cards, I feel safe and I feel secure. So that's exciting. Number 11, sitting in the sunroom reading my cards at night by candlelight. Number 12, having tarot-based dreams. I don't know if anybody else has that. I have them more and more and more all the time. Cassia from Tarot Map just did a video interview with, well, she did it a while ago, but she just released it with Marie White, who created the Marielle. And she had a lot of dreams while she was creating it. And I found that really, really exciting and not surprising at all. So that was cool. Number 13, when the tarot appears in an embodied form. And I have videos about this. Maybe I'll put them in the comments section, or not the comments, the description box. But like, I had some experiences earlier this spring of, you know, being out driving in the car and seeing the Fool, seeing the Magician. And it was amazing. I'm waiting to either see another magician at this point, or, for the the mysticism to bring forward a high priestess. So we'll see what happens. Number 14, when the deck tells you how it wants to be read. So we all think we have our way of reading the cards, and sometimes you come across a deck and the deck is like, that's nice and everything, but actually I have a different way. So one of the ways that has happened is working with the Luminous Void deck, which I love. It's new to me. It has made it clear in no uncertain terms that it wants 3, minimum 3. Well, last night it just decided, like, no, 3's not enough. Actually, you need 4. So it dropped, the Magician next, and then, out popped these two kind of stuck together. So the Hierophant was on top, and its 7 of Swords was on the bottom. And it actually ended up being an incredibly powerful reading, based on the deck itself. So again, I go back to the voice. It has its own voice, and it has its own way that it wants the cards to be interpreted. And then number 15, there's so many different voices in the tarot and so many different lineages, and yet it's all one source. And so I feel like it doesn't really matter whether I pick up a Marseille deck or or a Thoth or an RWS. I just try to get to know the voice of that deck. Even if it's RWS, I just want to understand better, like, okay, but what else? What else is influencing this, or how does it read, in that lineage? And then finally, number 16, when the tarot kicks your butt and tells you off. So last week I had a really rough day on a Friday, and I got a real sort of like, just telling you the truth. You're upset, you're worried, you need to get to work. Get off your butt and do the work. And I did. And I just put my decks away for the week, and except to take photos and do business stuff. And the next reading I had after that was like, hey, look at you. You did a great job. So yeah. So those are my 16 pieces of tarot happiness. And they're very long because I can't seem to shut up and I talk all the time. All right, guys. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. And I'm excited to watch anyone else's videos about tarot happiness because it's just so cool. All right. Bye.